58, 59, 60. The game of hide-and-seek was the activity of the night. A 2-day downpour, showing no cessation, meant sludge, sludge, and more sludge. Jen had an idea of the children's whereabouts. They always chose to hide as a duo and in the identical location. Seemingly, twins had a penchant for companionship. Where might they be? She uttered convincingly, the sound of concealed giggles resonating somewhere in the house. She padded softly down the corridor, peeking into their room. My, I'll never locate them. Perhaps. Here, she exclaimed, abruptly kneeling and pulling the bedspread aside. Ah, I suppose not. She muttered, scrutinizing the vacant space beneath the bed. What about? Here, she cried out, this time towards an empty wardrobe. They're really pushing me this time, she mused. The bathroom was clear, the laundry room empty. She knew they were too frightened to brave the basement, but resolved to inspect it once all other possibilities were exhausted. Stomping down the staircase noisily to broadcast her arrival, Jen hoped to provoke some giggles and rustling. I'm coming to find you, she sang. She halted, struck by the eerie quietude. With a 5-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl, the only quiet she ever had was when they were asleep, and that was frequently punctuated by bad dreams. Jordan! Casey! You've triumphed, kids! I admit defeat, she announced cheerfully. Ollie ollie oxen free. You've won, she cried, this time with a touch more urgency. I'm done playing. It's dinner time now. Still, no response. Okay, here's the deal. If you emerge now, we'll get a huge, cheesy pizza, a pair of tubs of any ice cream you fancy, and we'll rent a movie. But you must come out immediately. After a minute of tense silence, panic began to take hold. All right, kids, come out now. If you don't, there will be consequences, got it? She declared sternly. Jordan Oliver Jones, you and your sister must come out right now. Suddenly, there was noise from upstairs, and Jen dashed up the steps. Why on earth did you take so long? She scolded as she returned to the ground floor. Mid-sentence, Jen halted. The front door was ajar. She was certain she'd locked it. She was meticulous about securing the door and verified it at least twice daily. She dashed onto the veranda, her head spinning, on the verge of hyperventilation. Jordan! Casey! She re-entered and dialed the police. Jen wasn't in a clear headspace. I need assistance. My children are gone.
Cherry Street, 43, Cherry Street. We were playing hide and seek and I couldn't locate them anywhere, and then I found the door open and they're absent.
They've vanished, she cried, her panic escalating. Could they possibly be with their father, a family member, or a neighbor? Is there anyone who might have taken them? The composed voice on the phone inquired. My family resides elsewhere and the neighbors are away and... Jen felt a knot in her stomach. Dear God, their father. I have a restraining order against him. He has no business being here, not in town or anywhere close. I need you to return inside and lock the doors for safety. Make sure all windows are fastened as well. I'm dispatching a unit to surveil the vicinity. Can you do that for me? The operator's calming voice requested. Yes, all right, I'm inside, Jen panted. Excellent. Can you tell me about their father? The officer inquired. Jen shivered as the memories rushed back. He murdered his previous wife in our house. It was headline news. Jeremy Picking, Yes, I remember, the officer interjected. Shouldn't he be? Jen waited for her to finish and heard silence. Hello? Hello? Are you there? Jen tried another number, and there was no dial tone. She jumped hard at the sound of a loud knock at the door. She saw what looked like an officer's uniform through the frosted glass and rushed to unlock it. "Are you okay, Jen?" It was Officer John Daly, an old peer of Jen's from high school and police officer in town for over a decade. "Gosh, you got here fast," Jen sighed, relieved to not be alone anymore. "The kids, John, they're gone." "Don't worry, Jen," John interjected, holding her shoulders as she started to weep again. "They're probably just running around the neighborhood, messing around. I've got 2 cars out patrolling right now. Just stay inside and try to keep a cool head. We'll find them." Jen locked the door behind her again and paced the floor, wringing her hands, peering out the window, and rechecking every potential hiding spot. As she crawled out from under the dining room table, she suddenly noticed motion on the second floor of the house next door. Her breathing stopped. They were supposed to be away for the weekend. A light in the attic flicked on, and the curtains swayed. Jen walked right up to her window, close enough for her nose to touch the glass, when the light suddenly flicked off again. Jen yanked the curtains closed, feeling exposed. She ran through the house, checking the locks again, roughly pulling all the curtains closed. She reached the glass door in the kitchen and came face to face with her neighbor Todd, screaming loudly enough to make him jump. Todd frowned, breathing heavily, and shook his head. "Jesus, Jen, what is it? What happened?" Jen cracked the door open, the chain lock still in place. "Sorry, Todd." She suddenly remembered he was supposed to be out of town. "Wait, why are you here? And why are you in town?" Todd looked slightly offended. "Well, Chrissy and I got into a big argument over how her dad always treats me and, while it was pretty rough, I am being spared a trip to see the in-laws. But, yeah, I got home like 10 minutes ago and saw Officer Daly leaving, so I figured I'd come check in on you and see if everything was okay." "Oh, yeah, it's just, well, the kids, we were playing hide-and-go-seek and I couldn't find them." Something shiny glinting by Todd's side caught her eye. He gripped a pair of shears in his left hand. Todd followed her eyes down to see what had stopped her so abruptly. "Oh. Sorry, yeah, when I was crossing the backyard to get to yours, a lot of brush was getting in my way, so I thought I'd just get on it and, get it out of the way, and, you don't have to talk to me through the door." Todd smiled, taking a step forward. Jen didn't flinch. Her mind was racing. The phone line was down. Todd had appeared out of nowhere. The shears, the phone, the kids, the shears. Jen slammed the door in Todd's face and locked the other 2 bolts. "Hey!" Todd shouted and banged the door with the fist holding the shears. "I just want to talk," he shouted, still banging the door. Jen ran upstairs and tore through her father's old chest, desperately clawing around for the old 9mm. Why would Todd want her children? Was he trying to get her alone? His wife was out of town, and he was always flirting just a bit too much. She found the gun just as she heard glass shattering downstairs. She silently loaded and cocked it. As much as instinct told her to hide, she couldn't, not with Jordan and Casey's lives at stake. She crouched down, surveying the first floor from the top step. The kitchen door was completely obliterated, and Todd lay sprawled out on his chest. It had to be Jeremy. He took the kids, and now he was back to take her. "This can't be happening," she repeated in her head over and over. She cracked. She couldn't take the tension any longer. "What do you want from us?" She screeched down the stairs. "Jen," she heard John shout back. "Oh God," she cried out as she raced down the stairs. John stood in the living room facing the kitchen with his pistol drawn. She threw her left arm around him, keeping the gun out of sight. She wasn't entirely sure if it was legal for her to have the weapon. "Todd was here, he's not supposed to be, and he had these big shears and I freaked out." She wailed into his shoulder. "I think Jeremy was here, there's blood everywhere dash. Don't worry, I showed up just as Todd broke the glass to get in through your kitchen door. I shot him, it wasn't Jeremy," he said, stroking her hair. But I didn't hear any gunshots, Jen said, confused, thinking surely Todd had been stabbed. Silencer, said John, I didn't want to shake up the whole neighborhood if I didn't have to. Oh, right, Jen exhaled, are my children at his house? Did you find them? Was Todd even involved in that, or does he just have amazing timing? Is he going to be okay? SH, John said, holding her tighter. You don't have to worry about John or Jeremy or any other man ever again. I'll make sure of it. Now, how about some dinner? Jen pulled away, frowning. John, I can't exactly eat right now. My children are missing, she began tearing up. John continued smiling. How about I go with you and we look for them together? You know, help the other guys you said are looking? Jen offered. Let them do their job, sweetie. They don't need any help. These are professional police officers. We're going to find little Jordan and Casey. Jen stopped moving, trying to remember when she told him the names of her children. They went to the same high school together, but that was all. He didn't know anything about her children. In fact, he hadn't even asked for their descriptions to tell the dispatchers who to look for. We'll get a big cheesy pizza, he continued, 2 flavors of ice cream and, hey, maybe we'll even rent a movie to get your mind off of things. Her heart dropped, her stomach flew into her throat, and her breathing grew short and shallow. John, how do the dispatchers know who to look for? Jen asked slowly. I told them what they look like, Jenny. You really need to calm down, John said with a new note of seriousness to his voice. John, how do you know what my children look like? Jen asked, gripping the gun still hidden behind her back. John's smile faded and he took a step closer, his fists clenched. That's really not important, Jenny. Don't you want your children to be found? Don't you want them safe? Don't you want your children back, Jenny? Why do you keep calling me Jenny? You ask a lot of questions, John shouted, making Jen jump. That is what you liked to be called in high school, wasn't it? When we still hung out. Before you met that freak, Jeremy, and cut me out of your life completely. John, where are my kids? Jen shouted back. Jeremy's children are none of your concern anymore. John roared. Jen pulled the gun from behind her back and pointed it at John, shaking, praying she loaded it correctly. Todd didn't break the glass door, did he? Jen asked softly. Did he? She shouted. He was just another man that wanted to get to you, John slurred lazily, unfazed by the gun, as he plopped down on the couch. You know, if you shoot me, you'll never find them. Jen felt her will slipping as she sobbed. What do you want? She whimpered. Sit, John ordered, and give me the gun. Jen did as she was told and collapsed into the armchair. Did you even notice how much I cared about you in high school? I never stopped caring. I've been watching you and keeping you safe for years, Jen, John spat. John continued his diatribe, relaying stories from high school that Jen barely remembered. As he ranted, she noticed a light out of the corner of her eye. It was Chrissy. She was home from her parents' place. Please come here looking for Todd, Jen thought to herself. Please, please, please. Jen kept her eyes focused on Todd as she noticed Chrissy crossing her backyard in her peripheral. I can keep you safe. No one will ever touch you ever again. Think of Casey. Think of little Jordan. I'll keep them. John and Jen jumped as Chrissy's screams interrupted them. She'd found Todd. Jen seized the moment to snatch back the gun. John lunged for it, setting it off. His face froze, his eyelids drooping. He'd taken a bullet straight to the gut. John staggered backward, crashing to the floor. Jen ran to Chrissy, who held Todd in her arms. He drifted in and out of consciousness. There's no time to explain. Please, I need to use your phone, Jen begged. She helped Chrissy drag Todd to the front yard just as two officers screeched to a halt in their patrol cars. Four officers with guns drawn rushed toward the house yelling for Jen and Chrissy to lay down. Apparently, neighbors contacted police at the sound of the gunshot. The officers didn't immediately comprehend why one of their own was lying on Jen's floor after her children went missing. However, after hearing knocking coming from John's patrol vehicle, they found Jordan and Casey unharmed in the trunk. John survived but was fired and sent to a psychiatric ward for counseling. My mother harbored a deep resentment for her father. As a child, the mention of grandfather Jack's name might as well have been profanity. I learned the story of their estrangement from my father, who made me promise never to let Mom know I knew. Jack, once married to my grandmother Kathy for 22 years, betrayed her trust. His infidelity wasn't a sporadic error, but a year-long secret rendezvous cloaked as regular fishing trips. The fish was named Sally, half his age. Grandmother Kathy's reaction to this betrayal, I never knew the specifics, but the consequence was grave. She took her own life. This was before my birth, but my mom hasn't had a conversation with her father since then. Despite this, I was introduced to him. It took 8 years after my birth, several pleas from him before Mom allowed it. The arrangement involved my dad as an intermediary for communication. The meeting was scary, especially with Mom's constant ominous comments and warnings about him, further exacerbated by the fact that we had to drive an hour into the desert to his home. According to Mom, he could be a murderer or slander her in my presence. But my dad painted a different picture. He described him as an art history professor with a fully equipped studio. He convinced me that I would enjoy my time there. This calmed my fears somewhat and piqued my curiosity. Upon meeting him, he was an aged man, rotund with a bald head marred with discoloration, and a massive mustache that fluttered as he spoke. I confronted him about his relationship with my grandmother. His response stopped him in his tracks, and my dad rushed to shield me from any potential harm. But Jack simply squatted to my level and looked into my eyes. His love for Kathy, he confessed, was never in question. But love, he said, doesn't always translate to happiness. He was not strong enough to endure unhappiness anymore, but too cowardly to tell Kathy the truth. This explanation made sense to my 8-year-old mind. We painted together. His art studio turned out to be as fascinating as my dad had described. I even expressed my desire to visit again, with my mom's permission. From then on, I started visiting him every now and then. Jack taught me painting, and his love for portraits rubbed off on me. He once told me that a good portrait captures the subject, but a great portrait is always a reflection of the artist. He had a special gallery for his self-portraits, a new one for every year. His aging process was evident in these paintings, his expressions increasingly sorrowful and weary. His hope was that he would paint a happy picture when my mom forgave him. When I turned 19, Jack's portraits took a disturbing turn. His self-portraits started losing features, the strokes grew harsher. Soon after, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. His obsession with painting increased. He produced multiple self-portraits that were hardly human anymore, and he'd get furious if I didn't see him in them. His memory deteriorated. He even forgot Mom's resentment towards him. Jack passed away at 86, a year after suffering a stroke that ended his painting. It was just my dad and I at his funeral. Mom locked herself in her room, unable to face the situation. Despite this, Jack left everything to her in his will, including his house. I was tasked with packing his belongings, which is when I found his last self-portrait. The painting was a disturbingly precise depiction of Jack in his coffin, peaceful. I decided to hang it in my room. But strange things started happening. The painting seemed to change, Jack's expressions seemed to vary. Initially, it was peaceful, as I remembered from the funeral. But as the days went by, his expression became one of anguish. His eyes, once peacefully shut, seemed to open just slightly, revealing a pained glint. I even noticed his hand clenching and unclenching. It was terrifying and fascinating at the same time. One night, I woke up to a feeling of someone watching me. Turning towards the painting, Jack's eyes were wide open, looking straight at me. I tried to tell myself it was my imagination, a trick of the dim light. The next morning, however, his eyes were still wide open, staring into nothingness. I moved the painting into the attic, unable to bear his haunting gaze anymore. But things only escalated from there. I would hear shuffling sounds from the attic, sometimes a muffled sobbing. On some nights, I could swear I heard him call out my name. I tried to share these experiences with my parents, but they dismissed it as stress or nightmares. Deciding to confront this myself, I went to the attic one night when the noises were particularly loud. The sobbing had turned into a wail. As I neared the painting, I felt a cold gust of air. It was as if the temperature had dropped several degrees around it. The attic, usually dusty and dry, felt damp, like a cold, rainy night. Upon looking at the painting, I saw Jack's face contorted in sorrow, his eyes streaming tears. It was such a lifelike portrayal of sorrow that it was hard to believe it was a painting. Suddenly, the sobbing stopped, and Jack's eyes met mine. It felt as if he was trying to communicate something to me, a plea for forgiveness, a plea for peace. Confronted with this uncanny supernatural experience, I decided to do the one thing I thought might help Jack. I took the painting to my mother, telling her everything. She looked at the painting in disbelief as Jack's eyes bore into hers. "I forgive you, Dad," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. As soon as the words left her mouth, the painting seemed to change again. Jack's eyes closed, his face relaxed, and the painting, for the first time in a long time, seemed peaceful. The haunting activities ceased after that, and I moved the painting back to my room. Grandfather Jack's painting remains a tangible reminder of a complex, remorseful man who sought forgiveness even beyond death. It helped bring closure for my mother, and a strange, supernatural experience for me. Even though he is gone, Jack lives on in his art, his legacy etched on canvas, and in our hearts. The Art Room Monster. It was in the quaint town of Claymore that the story of Alice started. A quiet, introverted girl of 9, Alice was not like other children. She had a world of her own, a world colored and shaped by her vivid imagination, and at the heart of it was her best friend, an imaginative creation of her own, named Doodle. Doodle was a friendly monster, concocted from swirls of vibrant paint and Alice's lonely heart. With oversized eyes, a crooked smile, and a round, fluffy body, Doodle became Alice's constant companion, a confidant in her solitude, and her muse in art class. This was a friendship she cherished, and it kept her content. As time passed, though, Alice's colorful world began to morph. Her sketches started to change. The joyful hues of her imaginary friend began to share the paper with a new, more sinister figure. This was not the friendly Doodle she'd created. This figure was darker, with sharp edges and a malicious grin. Alice introduced this figure to her concerned art teacher as Shade, Doodle's new friend. As much as her teacher tried to dismiss this as a manifestation of Alice's imagination, she couldn't shake off the eerie chill that the character's representation invoked. A chilling pattern soon emerged. After the appearance of Shade, children began to go missing from Claymore Elementary. First, it was Tommy, the school bully. Then, it was sweet, innocent little Sarah, followed by many others. As the town reeled from the disappearances, Alice continued drawing, her artwork now predominantly featuring Shade. Despite the disarray in Claymore, Alice seemed unperturbed. It was only when her art teacher noticed the disturbing detail in Alice's recent work did she realize the horrifying truth. The drawings Alice produced were no longer her innocent imagination, they were recreations of the school premises, with Shade standing ominously in the last known locations of the missing children. Confronting Alice about this, the frightened teacher was met with a chilling revelation. "Shade isn't just a drawing anymore, miss," Alice said, her voice betraying no emotion, Doodle brought him to life. The school descended into panic. Psychological evaluations deemed Alice as displaying signs of dissociation, but the continued disappearance of students, coinciding with the ominous details of Alice's drawings, left the people horrified and helpless. As the authorities stepped in, it was Alice's art room that bore the brunt of the investigation. And it was there that they found a secret door behind the canvas stand, leading to a labyrinth of tunnels, the lair of the art room monster. The children were found, alive but scared, bearing no memory of what transpired. Alice was taken into counseling, her drawings monitored closely, with Doodle remaining her constant companion. But Shade was gone. As for the art room, it was sealed off. Yet, the art room monster lived on, a chilling tale whispered in the corridors of Claymore Elementary, a ghost story that the small town would never forget. To this day, Alice draws, with Doodle by her side, and Claymore waits in terrified silence, praying that her pencil never again gives birth to another monster.